In modern battle, the speed and quality of information into and out of the command center will be decisive. This could have been avoided if the computing systems had been faster and more intelligent. Consequently, a vast amount of money and effort is now being put into the research necessary to make such systems available to this country's defense. At the heart of the problem is the question of artificial intelligence. A large recognizable landmark in Cambridge, equally recognizable. Like all universities, it attracts some of the most intelligent from our midst. The word intelligence is used diversely to describe not only human beings and other animals, but also the gathering of information. The dog responds to a command to seek, in a similar way but more intelligently than a computer can. But the computer, being man-made, can only be said to have artificial intelligence. Simple? No. Artificial intelligence, or AI as it is known in computer circles, is in its infancy, and it's already clear it will take very many years to grow up. Professor Margaret Bowden, Dean of the School of Social Sciences at Sussex University, has written extensively on the subject.
Artificial intelligence is the study of how to make computers do the sorts of things that human minds do. Now, some of those things we normally think of as requiring a lot of intelligence, like doing maths, or playing good chess, or giving a medical diagnosis, working out a scientific problem. All those sorts of things, I think we're used to thinking that computers might be able to do. And those are things being done by computers and artificial intelligence now. But there are other things which people don't normally think of as requiring intelligence, because we can all do them, without even thinking about it, that it's turned out to be very, very difficult to make computers do. These are things like talking your own natural language, never mind other languages. Things like seeing. For example, recognizing something when it's half hidden in shadow, or when there's something else in front of it, or if it's at a peculiar angle. Things like moving around the room without knocking into things, which a robot would have to do if it was the sort of robot that could wander around a factory floor, as opposed to being one that's clamped onto a workbench. All those things that we do so well, so easily and so unthinkingly, and which many animals can do as well, have, as I say, turned out to be very difficult to do in artificial intelligence. So today's computers can do all sorts of things the human mind can do, but only up to a point. Today's computers are intelligent only to a very limited extent.
These then are the areas to be conquered if computers are to become artificially intelligent, even to a limited extent. They must be able to see, handle objects, hear and speak, as well as solve problems and perhaps even create and learn. One of the companies taking artificial intelligence very seriously is GEC, to the extent of putting into this research area upwards of £500,000 a year. I asked John Streeter, who is concerned with computer applications, why GEC were putting so much effort into this research.
It's in our own interests. A high level of machine intelligence is very important, for instance, for our own manufacturing. Often in this environment, parts have to be moved in a very complicated way, and it matters in which order they're moved. This little experiment shows the sort of machine reasoning required. Here you have a model of a part of a factory process. The blocks are all of different shapes and sizes and need to be assembled in a precise manner. We use a slow-moving, low-geared machine in our experiments here for safety. When we set up this particular experiment, we've deliberately placed the fifth block upside down. The machine recognizes that something is wrong, uses the sensors built into its fingers to analyze the situation, and correct it.
So you expect the ability to handle objects on the factory floor will become progressively more sophisticated?
With the aid of AI inference techniques, certainly. This versatile hand has a control system which copies some of the features of human fingers. It can be programmed to handle objects in a quite remarkable manner. Turning a block over with the tips of the fingers of one hand is quite a trick for a machine.
See this having any practical value?
Certainly, this isn't a game. What we hope to do is put together a number of these small subtasks, the sort of things we've been showing you, into one complete larger task. This is, and most important for the AI point of view, we can cope with the corrections due to the unexpected.
Sometimes, however, fingertip sensors are not enough. It's necessary to see. To weld two pieces of metal together, the torch must very accurately follow the line between them. Easy enough if the line were always straight or followed any constant pattern. But such is the nature of the job that the lines vary and need the concentration of a skilled welder. For a machine to perform such a task, it would have to be able to see in order to follow whatever pattern the line might dictate. Here is such an operation. A team of scientists and engineers with several different disciplines contributed. The computer scientist responsible for its sight, William Tloxin.
Television cameras, and particularly miniature ones like this one, have been used for computer vision for a number of years. Information from this camera chip is fed into a computer, and software in the computer interprets the image so that the robot can see where to weld along the seam. The robot looks and adjusts its arm 4 times a second to track the seam. It can handle curved seams because it has a sense of 3-dimensional space that was programmed into the computer. In this particular case, we tried to fool the computer by programming it to weld a straight line seam, but we actually gave it a curved seam to weld. The robot's sense of vision correctly saw that the seam was curved and welded it perfectly. Of course, this is only a crude illustration of AI.
In Japan, Ikiro Kato, a professor at Waseda University, has built a synthesizer playing robot said to be capable of reading a sheet of music in just 15 seconds. An almost continuous waveform which it is difficult to separate into bits. This is as we normally speak, joining up our words. It would be much easier if we spoke very deliberately and separated each word. Then the wave on the screen would be divided into bits. Peter Schwartz is the manager of a division of Plessey in Romsey, which is endeavouring to solve some of the extremely difficult problems concerning direct communication with machines by the spoken word.
In fact, there are 2 distinct parts to this communication. Speech recognition, or input, that is machines that can listen, and speech synthesis, or output, that is machines that can talk. In fact, in the laboratory there are prototypes of machines in existence which can, with 95% certainty, convert speech to text from a 5,000 word base vocabulary.
Dear Sirs, comma, para. Further to mine of the 21st inst, colon, spare parts to arrive by the date suggested. Stop. Para. Go to the butcher and buy some cheap meat.
Our main problem is to find out more about speech, that is, to build the knowledge into rules and inferences for the machine to follow. Let's take 2 words that Alan just used, cheap meat. Sounds all right, doesn't it? But if we pronounce those words separately, they sound differently to when we pronounce them together. Cheap meat, cheap meat. Together the P is silent, cheap meat. This is just one example of the type of knowledge that the machine has to learn so that when we talk to the machine, it can type out the right words. Let me take another example. Please let us know. We understood that, and we expect the machine to type out. But there are lots of things it could type out with exactly the same pronunciation. We know all the other ones are wrong, But how is the machine supposed to know? It hasn't had our upbringing, hasn't got our intelligence. We have to teach it to infer what is the correct interpretation. So far, I've only been playing with one sentence, which gives some indication of the problems of only a limited vocabulary of 5,000 words, let alone the problem for 15,000 words that the average man in the street would use, or the 80,000 words that is estimated to be necessary for a basic word processor. In my opinion, we will be able to have machines which can listen and give a reasonable interpretation of what we say within about 5 years. Although intelligent two-way conversation with a machine is going to take considerably longer. One day, a machine will be able to recognize speech. Yes, that's what I said, recognize speech. Not what you thought I said, recognize speech. The problems to be solved are legion.
But if this means of communicating with a machine by talking is ever perfected, or at least made economically practical, the effects will be revolutionary. Extensive use of the keyboard will become a thing of the past. Even instant translation from one language to another may become possible. So AI will endow computers of the future with rudimentary sight, hearing, and speech. But how about solving problems? Aircraft and transportation appear to be favorite topics for AI research. Mel Davis has been working on one aspect of this for systems designers.
One application area where we've been using artificial intelligence techniques with some success is in air traffic control. The real test of a controller is to take over an uncontrolled and potentially disorganized situation and to impose control and order. Therefore, it follows that if we're to build an aid which the controller can depend upon, it too must be able to impose control and order. Keeping control, once things are nicely organized, is relatively easy. But some event which is not entirely expected, like an aircraft flying into your airspace, which you didn't plan for, can rapidly make even the best organized situation become disorganized. When we started on this project for the Royal Signals and Radar establishment at Malvern, we considered using mathematical techniques and traditional programming. But we found that there was no way of modeling the delays, the uncertainties, and perhaps the emergencies which could arise with that type of traditional technique. If we'd built a system in that way, it might have worked well for most of the time, but when something which we hadn't particularly allowed for or specifically planned happened, it could have failed in some unexpected way, it could have frozen up solid. So we had to turn to artificial intelligence, which we felt was the only feasible technique for this type of problem. We gave the system models of the environment, like a map, and models of behavior, like how to use a map. As well as using models, we used the principle of parallelism, not just to get speed of operation, but more importantly to allow the different components of the system to interact with each other. We mustn't think about the mathematical parts as having been replaced. They are used by the intelligent part of the system as tools, in much the same way that many intelligent systems use tools, like you and me. We have demonstrated the system against an air traffic simulator at Malvern. It is able to handle aircraft which appear in random positions with random speeds and directions. It can handle aircraft which are disobedient when the pilot turns left, although he's been told to turn right. And it can handle emergencies which can arise. And also, very importantly, the air traffic controller can intervene and change what the aid intended to do without it then becoming unable to continue. As a general point, when systems contain intelligence, such as aircraft containing human pilots, they can become imprecise and unpredictable, and we need intelligent techniques to manage them.
There are a lot of problems which require much faster calculations than present-day computers can manage. This building is the headquarters in this country for work that is going on in an attempt to revolutionize computer hardware. The project, dubbed Flagship, is captained by Colin Skelton.
In this laboratory, we develop all of our mainframe computers. The Flagship I command at this early stage occupies just a small space at the back of the laboratory. Over there, a small group of engineers is working near a new prototype machine. This machine is a parallel processing machine and is called Alice. Parallel processing is the big change in hardware that we're looking for. The design of computers has changed very little since the early days of Babbage, Turing and von Neumann. Of course, the technology has improved, but the machines still work in the same old way. Given a problem, they solve it in sequence, just one step at a time, and in order. Just as a car train unloads the cars one by one, and in order, so present-day computers tend to solve their problems one step at a time. Of course, with modern technology, each of these steps is taken at great speed. However, if many steps could be taken simultaneously, suppose all of the cars could be turned through 90 degrees and driven off the train at the same time. It would be a much faster system of unloading. The cars would be coming off in parallel. The design of Alice is just the beginning of the breakthrough that is necessary to produce low-cost computers with adequate power to exploit the expert systems which are already beginning to emerge. The definition of an expert system is a computer system which emulates human expertise by applying inference techniques to very large knowledge bases. Now, to exploit a knowledge base at an adequate performance to make it a useful tool, it is going to be necessary to use the techniques of parallel computing. Here, we're designing a parallel computer which promises a performance of well over 100 million calculations a second.
Clearly, computers of the future will be able to operate at this incredible speed, much faster than we can. However, they still won't be able to match the human mind in coming to conclusions about everyday problems. Medical treatment is a good example where speed could very well mean the difference between life and death. GEC have put their resources behind this research area, and to improve the speed of decision-making and the accuracy of diagnosis for patients with pains in the chest, Dr. Peter Emerson has been backed by Bupa in his work on a computer system at Westminster Hospital.
Before I tell you about this system that we've developed, I need to tell you something about the problem that it's been designed to solve. About 20 patients a week come into the casualty department here at Westminster Hospital complaining of pain in the chest, and 5 of them are going to be developing a heart attack. The problem that the casualty staff have is to pick out those 5 and admit them as quickly as possible to the coronary care unit, where there's a special level of apparatus and staff that's particularly designed to deal with the complications that can occur in the first 5 or 6 crucial hours after the start of a heart attack. There aren't many beds, so we want to avoid admitting patients who haven't got a heart attack, because this blocks beds for those who have. When someone comes to the casualty department complaining of pain in the chest, the patient is first seen by a nurse who records some observations and then calls the doctor. He examines the patient, orders tests such as a chest X-ray or a cardiograph, and then may request a consultation with a more senior doctor to discuss the results and make a decision. All this takes time and delays the admission of patients to the coronary care unit. This expert system is designed to speed up this process. First, the nurse is asked to indicate the site of the patient's pain. If it's in the middle of the chest at site 1, the cursor is moved to that point, and we go on to the next question. We go on like this, getting the answers to a number of other questions until we end up with a probability that the patient has or has not got a cardiac attack. This diagram shows what happens next. If the computed probability of a heart attack is high, 80% or more, the patient is admitted directly to the coronary care unit. If, on the other hand, the computed probability of a heart attack is low, that's 10% or less, the advice is that it's not a heart attack. I believe that systems like this one will play an increasingly important part in keeping down the cost of medical care and maintaining or improving the accuracy of diagnosis in the future.
Medicine aided by artificial intelligence. The support for making decisions about medical diagnosis and treatment is going to be an important application of expert systems in the future. The Department of Health and Social Security is a tenuous link, however. In a different department of ICL at the Arndale Centre in Manchester, new software is being designed. One of the projects which concerns us all is an attempt to clarify the DHSS mass of rules and regulations so that we can all find out quickly and accurately what are our dues. The idea is not so that we can all milk the system for as much cash as possible, attractive though this may seem. Problems are very complex, as Charlie Portman, who heads this section, will explain.
The idea is to design a tool which will be as useful to the DHSS officers as a group of experts would have been had they been available. Take supplementary benefits. Over 7 million claims are made each year. To be effective, our system must select the relevant rules from the enormous number that may apply and also choose appropriate case histories and offer these to the DHSS officer who's considering the claim. The consortium which is doing this work employs over 35 people located at 6 different sites in the country. Of these, the University of Surrey is doing some work on a prototype forms helper. Nigel Gilbert is in charge.
We're in the middle of building 2 prototypes of systems for the general public to use. They're to help them claim benefits. That means that they've got to be usable by people who haven't used computers before. Artificial intelligence techniques are useful for that because they make the systems much easier to use. One of the problems that people have in getting the benefits they're entitled to is the sheer complexity of Social Security. Benefit forms are particularly difficult, and that's why we've started writing this program called the Forms Helper. The value of using an electronic form like this is that the program can give a lot of guidance. For instance, the computer works out which is the next question to answer and recommends it by putting an arrowhead in the answer box. This is only a recommendation. The user can answer any other question on that page or even on another page of the form. If they want to look back at what they've already answered, that's easy, just as it's easy to look forward to what's coming. This is an example of what we call mixed initiative. Sometimes the program is in control, and sometimes the user is, the two working together to get the job done. When the form's complete, the computer prints a copy ready for the DHSS.
Our work is aimed not just at the DHSS, although if that was all we were able to do, it would be extremely useful. But we also wish to be able to support other organisations. Indeed, from this small acorn, we hope to be able to grow systems which can support decision making in many sorts of organisation.
It turns out that it's easier to write a program to enable a computer to solve specialist scientific problems or mathematical problems than it is to make the computer solve the problems that you and I solve every day of our lives. And one of the reasons for that is that there are all sorts of ways of thinking and reasoning, which we call common sense, which all of us have, which we don't understand at the theoretical level, and so we can't put into a computer. Not yet, anyway.
To try to capsulate what has been said and inferred, the research and developments going on in artificial intelligence is aimed at trying to make computers capable of acting more like us, bearing in mind that however imperfect we may be, our minds will always be more able than theirs. Ironically, before scientists tried to make computers see, speak and move, no one appreciated the rich subtleties involved in these universal human powers. Who knows? Perhaps as we search for alternatives, we may come to know ourselves better.